So some of you know we've teamed
Hello,
up with
everyone.
Pix,
My name is
and
John
that
Edwards.
is
Take Bakers on assignment, and together we make the Dad's Drinking Bourbon. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, thank you for making us part of your day. I really wish he was here because like my iPad battery is half
so much
down
technology
already. I'm like freaking out because I want to get all the information in for everything that's going on.
And that is
Leigha Kingsley. She is the director, the actress, and just say like, "Hey, I'm drinking this tonight."
But if you do tastings, the app is going to start matching
you. It's a documentary. It's in pre-production. She's going to be talking to a whole bunch of women come through the spirits industry.
You like
and we're
this
going to
one a lot.
learn
You
about
might
who
like
she's going to talk to, the type
as
of
you're
people
searching
that
through, you're
she's
going to see the
talking to.
percentage
But she's
of
here
like
for a
how
couple
well
of
you match
reasons.
to the other
Number
people
one, to
that are
educate
tasting
everybody
and
about
the
the
other
project. Number
drinks
two,
that they are
tell
tasting as well.
everybody
So
how they
this
can
thing
help
is
get
so
in
cool. It
on
gives you
supporting this
recommendations.
project
You
because
can see
this
how your
project
friends
is going to
rated
need some
things.
funding.
It's just a
this is all
fun
kind of
way
on
to
her
interact
bootstraps.
and
She's
drink whiskey
going out to
together,
people, trying to
even though
raise
we are
money
all
for this
virtual
film,
sometimes.
trying to get it
You could do it with the people in your
She's just an
neighborhood.
awesome
You could do it
person.
with
I mean,
people
I've been
across the
talking to her
country.
for 45
Pix
minutes.
is
We've
so
all got
much
to
fun.
know her
And go
on
to
Instagram. The Spirit of Women has their
download
own
the app.
Instagram
It's only
page
for
where you
Apple
kinda
right
get
now,
to
but we are
learn a
going to
little bit
get
more
it
about
for
Leigha and
Android
what she's
eventually.
doing.
I
Go to
reached out and I said,
pixshop.com,
why don't you come on Dad's
download
Drinking
the app
Bourbon
and tell us your story. I'd
Have
love to
fun
hear more.
plans for
So
the
welcome,
outdoors.
Leigha. I'm going to
Make
shut
the
up
memories
now
last
as I've been
with the
talking your
best
ear off for
outdoor
45
coolers and
minutes.
drinkware.
And I want to know about
Celebrating
you.
10
I want to
years
know
of
about
cool.
how you got
Orca was
started. I know
founded
you're
in
an
2012,
actress. You were
born
in
from the
great
idea of
movies like
making a
Semi-Pro
hard-sided
with
cooler
Will
that
Ferrell
beat
as
out
the
all the
ball
rest.
girl. You
Orca
were in The
coolers
Choice,
are built
Criminal
to be as
Minds,
strong
one of
as
my
the
favorite
adventures you
shows.
take them on.
So like
That's
you've
why
done
they have
the
a
gamut
lifetime
of
warranty.
being a
They'll give
producer,
you
being an actress,
world-class
all that.
maximum
Tell us a little
temperature
bit about your
retention.
career and
Orca's
how it
drinkware
led you
offers
to
the
the
same
Spirit
high
of
quality,
Women,
keeping your
and how you
drinks
got
icy
into
cold
acting
or
to
hot
begin
for
with.
hours,
Oh my
and they look
gosh.
great while
Well,
doing
thank
it.
you
Their
for
stainless
that
steel vacuum
incredible
sealed tumblers and
introduction.
martini cup
I'm
are perfect
thrilled to be
companions for
here.
your
I'm
next
so
outdoor
excited to be
adventure.
on
Go to
your amazing
orcacoolers.com
podcast. So thank you for having
/bourbon
me.
for
Yeah,
15% off
so
your order.
I
That's
am originally
orcacoolers.com
from Lexington, Kentucky.
/bourbon for
That's where my
15%
roots
off.
are.
Orca,
If we
make
have
it
any
last.
listeners that are in the military or involved in the military, my dad was actually in the military. He was in the Army and he flew Apaches and was a major. So I've actually lived all over the world. But when he retired, we retired in Lexington, Kentucky. So that's what I call home. I was in elementary school when that happened. So I graduated from Henry Clay High School. And then I moved out to Los Angeles right after high school. And I've been out here for over 10 years now. And yeah, I started out as an actress. I weirdly always knew that I wanted to be an actress since the time I was like 5 years old. I used to, this is so terrible, but I used to tell my mom that I was sick. And I would stay home from school and I would memorize lines from movies and then I would act them out in my room. So
what movies? What were your favorite movies to do that to?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, when I was really young and it was like cartoon movies, I used to do it to the Barbie movies. So I would play Barbie and I would just act out like the pink Corvette that she rode in. My dad bought me one of those for like my Barbie house. I had like a little pink Corvette. And then as I got older, so did the movies. But my favorite movie that I used to do it to was Speed with Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves.
I'm actually Googling right now because I'm trying to kind of figure out. And no, it was, never mind. It was past your time, not way past your time, because you're probably younger than me. Barbie and a Mermaid Tale was 2010. Fairy Secret, Princess Charm School, Mermaid Tale 2. That's the stuff that like my daughter is super into. So I've had to watch all those Barbie movies over and over and over, but that's probably not the ones you were watching.
No, it wasn't. But you know, I used to watch the Disney movies. So like The Mermaid, The Little Mermaid, I would write down all of the lyrics and all of the sentences to that movie. And then I would act those out. And it was really sad because I would play every character. So I was essentially just doing my own form of film.
I think we've all done that. I used to watch Top Gun every single day, every day.
Oh my God, amazing.
And I would act out the whole thing. And then when Goose died, I would run in the living room and I would tell my mom and dad, I go, Mom, Dad, Goose died. And then I'd go back in, finish it, and then rewind it and start it again.
Oh my God, that's amazing. We're kindred souls.
Yes, 100%. And like the best part about it is like the whole thing, like I can do just line after line of the whole thing. And like Forrest Gump, I was really bad on too.
Oh my gosh. I feel like everybody acted out Forrest Gump. Like, you couldn't help it. It was just, he had such good lines. How could you not?
That's a nice pair of shoes. You know, you can tell a lot about a person by the pair of shoes, where they're going, where they've been. I remember my first pair of shoes. Mama told me they'd take me anywhere.
That's pretty good.
But like, it was too much of it. I just remembered too much of it. But I never got into acting or anything like that because I was always doing the sports side. If it was High School Musical, I chose the wrong side.
Well, that was going to be my next question is, did you ever want to be an actor? Because that's the kind of stuff that us crazy actors did when we were kids.
I think I would fit in very well if I ever tried.
I think you would too.
To do it, but I just have never tried to do it. So if anyone's listening, I'm available.
Okay, so for my next film, because, you know, I do feature films, like narrative films as well, I'm going to be calling you.
Perfect. I'm in. I'm game. So you do this, you're in it, you're in LA, you've left Lexington. The bigger question before we even get to like all that other stuff is, did you bleed blue or red?
Oh boy. Oh, this is such a dangerous question. Oh man, such a dangerous question. And here's why. Growing up in Lexington, of course, go big blue, right?
Yeah.
But then my mom and dad divorced and my mom remarried and my stepdad is from Louisville. My mom and my stepdad moved to Louisville after my sister and I moved out of the house. So we've got these controversy like opinions because he definitely bleeds red and, you know, we bleed blue. So there's a lot of tension in the house sometimes.
Can I tell you how to fix it real quick?
Please do, because it's never been fixed.
So I am a proud UK grad. It's not going to fix everything 100%, but I graduated from the University of Kentucky. And here's the thing I'll say. Go blue. But when they're not playing Kentucky, I hope Louisville wins every game they play. Because it is better for the state when both of them are doing well. I'll just leave it at that. Like the rivalry games are a million times better. If one of them sucks and one of them's good, it's not a good rivalry game. Football or basketball. Like I want them both to be the best they possibly can be. And then I want Kentucky to win.
That is a very good answer. And I'm going to take that home with me and I will let you know how that works.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, y'all can win they're in different conferences, you know, like you go win the conference championship, Louisville, like it's okay. But when you play Kentucky, we win.
Totally. I mean, me personally, I am for UK. I am for blue. It's my home. It's where I went to school. You know, I can't betray them, but keeping the peace in the house between those two things, oh boy.
That's a rough one. That is a rough one.
Yeah.
So anyways, you go out to LA. How do you end up like, not to get about you and acting, and I just find it interesting. Like, what did you do? Who'd you talk to when you went out there? Like, how'd you find an agent? All that fun stuff.
Oh man. How many hours do you have? So when I moved to LA, I didn't know anybody actually. And I had been working 3 jobs in Lexington to save up enough money to be able to move to LA on my own. I didn't know anyone when I first moved to LA. I had a friend of mine back home in Lexington who knew somebody out here and she introduced me to her and she became actually my very first roommate. And then I put myself through a 2-year Meisner program. So Meisner is an acting program and you graduate from it. It's twice a week in the evening. So I was working full time during the day and then I was going to school for acting at night for 2 years. And that's also when I booked semi-pro, which was pretty wild. I didn't have an agent at the time. I did a ton of research on agencies. I reached out to them. There were a lot of things that I just didn't know at the time about LA and like how to get into the acting world. So I kind of did exactly what I do now, which is when I don't know how to do something or I'm not familiar with how to get into something, I just figure it out. So I read a lot, I do a lot of research, and I ended up booking semi-pro, which led to me having my very first manager out here. And then after that, I was auditioning a lot and I was looking at a lot of these roles that I was auditioning for, a lot of the TV shows that I was seeing on networks, a lot of the films that were getting made. And as a female, I was really disheartened and disappointed in what was being made and how women were portrayed in Hollywood and in film and in TV. And a lot of these scripts that I was reading and that I was passing on, even though I had no money and I could really use the credits, but I was passing on them anyway, were really terrible scripts. And they weren't things that I wanted to be represented as a female actress in Hollywood. It just wasn't the way that I wanted people to see me. And so there were a lot of things that I passed on. And that actually led me into the world of writing, because I was like, if you're going to greenlight this pilot on this network and put millions of dollars in it, and it's terrible and should never be made, then I'm going to create something that I want to see on TV and in film for roles that I want to play, that are strong female leads, that empower women, that tell real stories, that are character driven, that are interesting, to try and change this perception and change this, this way that we see women in film and television. So that led me into writing. I'd never taken a writing class. I had never gone to school for writing. It wasn't something that was in my forte outside of, I had read, a shit ton of scripts. I watched a ton of film and TV. I had auditioned for years. So I understood the formula of writing scripts. So that's when I started getting into writing. And then my film and TV scripts became finalists at places like Sundance and HBO Project Greenlight and the New York Television Festival. So I started to kind of build these accolades. And so I was like, okay, there really is something here. There's something that I'm tapping into that is working and that is empowering for women. And so that progression kind of led me into producing as well. Producing opened up this whole new avenue for me where I could not only write things now, but I could also help produce them. And I think that knowledge is power. And I think that one of the things that we have to look at in any industry is who's the one at the top making decisions. And in Hollywood, most of the time it's men. I saw this need to create space for women in these higher key positions, like a producer, because they're the ones that are greenlighting things. They're the ones that are getting things made. They're the ones that are building relationships. So I wanted to be able to be at that table. So that kind of led me into producing feature films and television shows, which then eventually led into what I'm doing now and directing this documentary about the trailblazing women who are paving the way for females in this, male-dominated industry of whiskey and bourbon.
Yes, we are going to get to this film because this is the reason why you're here. But I find it interesting too, like movies that you would think would be trailblazing for women at the time, and this is probably pre when you were out there, because, like Cruel Intentions, it's great. She is a boss, but she's portrayed as ruthless and mean and all this other stuff and just completely cruel, not to take the movie from it, right? So it's either like she's 100% an awful person, or you have Legally Blonde in 2001, which is she's a complete ditz and then like finds herself but it was never like anybody is just whole, like just a regular, like there's always some character flaw to their persona, even in like these movies that are supposed to be empowering women at the time. Because I think there was a switch, and yes, it's not perfect, right? Like not everything is perfect. Not everything is 100% there. But like there was a switch prior to Me Too where women did get meatier parts. And I mean, do you think that was because of people like you coming up and that generation that was coming up that was kind of like, yeah, we're going to do things a little bit differently here? Or like, when do you think that switch kind of happened in Hollywood to allow for some of that, the deeper characters, the more complex characters, and really the more interesting stories to come out?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because you're right. Films like Cruel Intentions and Legally Blonde at that time, they were probably seen as trying to be female empowerment, female led and that sort of thing. But really they were just, and don't get me wrong, I love Legally Blonde. Like I love it. But when you take a step back,
it's a fan favorite. But when you really examine it, it's like it's not okay.
No, they're basically putting on the party tricks of those like characters of that person. Yeah, like you said, it's like not okay. Like she has depth. Let's show what her depth is. And I think that there's a way to do that in balance. I think that there has been a shift, and I definitely noticed before the Me Too movement that shift was starting to take place. At where I was studying acting, because, when you're an actor, you never stop studying. There was a group of women, and we kind of all got together and were like, how can we help create more opportunity for women in front of and behind the camera? So we actually started an organization together at that time that was trying to give opportunities for women in roles like being a DP, which is for people that don't know, a DP is the director of photography. So they're the person that's working directly with the director. The director says, hey, I want to set up this shot and I want the light to be coming in through the window so it looks like morning, but I want it to be a little darker on the right-hand side and give it this eerie feel. So it's actually the DP's job to do that. He works with the gaffer and the grip and all his women and men to be able to set up that shot. But you don't really see women in those roles. And it's not because they don't want to be there. It's because the opportunity isn't really there. They don't know how to get their foot in the door. So part of what we did was try and create a space, a community for women to be able to get into positions like that, to get into positions that were predominantly, male dominated. So I think that there was like this push that was happening with women like myself in the industry that wanted to see change and weren't seeing it fast enough. And so we were just like, okay, well, everybody can fuck off. We're just going to do it ourselves.
But I also think it's like even the more prominent people, and I was going to say like a theory I have, and what you're saying is stuff that I'm not even considering, right? Because when you're on the outside and you're looking at these films, you're not even considering like, are women the DP or women the gaffer or women the grip? Like you're considering like, hey, I think it's really cool that like Olivia Wilde does these like big movies, but then they always make sure to do indie movies too, to show that they have depth. And like, I think it's probably, and I'm just being naive from what I know, it's probably a mixture of both. Like it's that generation that is coming up, like the Lake Bells and the folks that are doing the bigger movies and then the indie movies. And it's like Anna Kendrick doing an indie movie with her friends. Those folks like that are showing like, okay. And I think like these generation of actors in general, like they're going to take something and they're going to look at it and go, okay, I do this one for money. I do this one for fun. I do this one for money. I do this one for fun. And it's like they're bouncing back and forth. But I didn't even think to like go back, because I think the ones they're doing for fun is like, okay, they're picking it, they're producing it, they're greenlighting it, they're doing it on shoestring budgets. But it's really like, to your point, and obviously to your point, you're the expert on the situation, but it's making sure all the positions there, like there's women everywhere, and there's people, not just people that are picking it like based off like, hey, this is a superhero movie, we'll make $1 billion. Like this is what we need to do.
Yeah, totally. And I think that when you're an artist and you're somebody who really loves the craft and you want to be able to control what you make and what means something to you, because every artist is, drawn towards different work, different characters, different depth, different stories. And so in order to maybe be able to support that, they do kind of go off and do these bigger budget films that they're going to get paid a lot, which is going to put them in the spotlight. It's a very smart move for them, really, because if they are out there in the spotlight and they are doing these bigger blockbuster films, then that allows them the vehicle that they need to then do what they're really passionate about, which is greenlighting films that matter to them, putting their friends in films that they know are talented that should be given that opportunity, hiring the crew, everybody behind the camera, like you're talking about, so that women can be hired for, the role of a DP or a gaffer or a PA or whatever. There's so many roles on a set that people aren't always aware of. It's not just the actors that matter. It's the people that are behind the camera that are actually making the production happen every single day for hours and hours and hours. And their roles are just as vital. So I think giving those people the opportunity from marginalized groups and for women is just as important as it is that we see female directors and, strong female lead roles and all of that sort of stuff. And I'll tell you a funny story. I wrote a feature film that is a horror/thriller film called The Abandoned. And I did that a few years ago. And it was because I got tired of reading and having to audition for horror/thriller roles where women are portrayed, as you can imagine from seeing so many horror films. And I was just like, are there no smart women in horror films? Are there any women that don't run upstairs? Are there any women that don't die in the woods having sex?
Are there any women that
fucking kidding me?
Don't pick up the phone? Like, just don't pick up the phone. You're by yourself. Like, although
lock the door.
Not to derail this, but did you see the Courtney Cox video that just came out with her and the Scream Mask guy? And
I didn't, but I love Courtney Cox. What was it?
It was like a recreation of Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero. And
oh my God.
The Scream guy was like, it's me. And she said, hi. And then he said, I'm the problem. It's me. And then she gave him the knife and then he stabbed her.
Oh my God. That's so good.
And like, I'm not going to apologize. Everybody that's watched our Instagram, like, I've had Midnights on repeat for a week and a half. It's okay. She writes good music, y'all. But
100% she does.
But I really liked watching that. That was a great reel, by the way. Just go find it.
That's hilarious. I'm going to have to go find it and then I'll repost it on our Instagram. That is so good.
It is. Wow. But you're right. I mean, all of the horror movie things, it's like, don't go there. Why are you going in there? Like,
I feel like writers can be smarter. Like, don't be a lazy writer. And that was such a frustration that I had. And so when we pitched this to HBO for Project Greenlight, we had to actually do a video. So we had to do a pitch video that we had to send in. And that's how you hopefully got to the next round. And so I came up with this idea for the pitch video that I basically wanted to show them everything that our horror film was not going to be. So we shot a small sequence, almost like a short film that told the story of a serial killer. And we put in every single fucking cliche that there is about women in horror films. So we had like 4 or 5 characters and they would the women would run up the stairs and then one of the women was being chased by the killer and she couldn't run. She just kept falling to the point where the killer was just standing over her and going like, this is too easy. Like, can you just get up and try to run? Like, and the car didn't start. There was no cell phone reception. Like, we literally put in every single cliche and we're like, this is what you won't see in our film. And we got into the top 10.
Oh, that's awesome. And I also loved, I mean, the thing about me too is I'm from Boston. Project Greenlight just has a special place for me with Matt and Ben. And
totally,
I'll just leave it at that. But the other thing I would say is there's a lot more interesting stuff that's come out lately, especially with A Quiet Place and women, just what they're doing, especially like in the familial sense of it. And I know it's going to sound cliche and it's going to sound easy, but it's like, it's always like a young single girl that's acting stupid. And then like a mom is acting strong. Like, look at like what she's doing in A Quiet Place, like that whole movie. And it's also, I think, the difference between like a horror movie and a thriller. And I feel like thrillers can be smarter. Like sometimes I will throw this out there and I know it sounds bad, but like every single trope that you would expect to happen in a horror movie sometimes can make it fun. As bad as it sounds, right? Like as bad, it's like, she's going to fall and like, know he's going to do this. And like, you just know, like, why do they do those predictive things? And there's something about it in a horror movie. Like when you're going to see a slasher like Scream, or I Know What You Did Last Summer. I have expectations there and they're not high. Like,
and they're very low.
They're very low.
I know what I'm getting into. Yeah. And that's the thing is like, there is a time and a place for that because all of those movies that you just mentioned are amazing films. I love those films. And so there definitely is a genre for that. And there's a place for that type of, I don't even want to say comedy because it's not necessarily comedy, but it's like this like shtick about it, right?
No, it's totally a comedy. Like I find it hilarious. Saw scares the shit out of me, but like Scream makes me laugh.
Yes, exactly. And I completely agree with that. I think it's when films that I often would read, they're trying to be serious. It's like bad writing where you're just like, oh, you have decided that horror films make money, and so you're just putting something on the page because this is a genre that sells really easily. And so you're just kind of putting things together and calling it a film, and somebody's giving you money to make it. And there's much better ways and smarter ways to do this if that's what you're going to do. And as a writer, I feel like I'm probably really annoying with some of my writing partners because I refuse to fall into tropes unless it's something where it's supposed to be that way, like a Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer. But if it's like trying to be an intelligent film that really tells a story, I'm the annoying person that's like, no, guys, we can't do that. Like, come on, we gotta find we gotta find a better storyline here.
Oh, I mean, so one of my favorite TV shows got made again. It got rebooted, but was Mystery Science Theater 3000.
I have not seen that.
Oh my God. It's a guy and robots that are abandoned on this space station, and they make them watch terrible old horror movies, and they sit there and just clown on the horror movies the whole time. So you see them, like you see the screen, and then you see their three shadows at the bottom. So it's two robots and this guy, and they just make fun of the movie the whole time.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Oh wait, I think I have seen this. Yes, they make fun of the movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
They make fun of the movie the whole time. So like, I am completely for horror movies, like when it embraces the suck and you're just like, I'm going to make fun of this movie the whole time. Right? But like, and it's terrible. You don't go in saying like, but I really do love where things have been able to go, like with your movie and with some of these newer movies that have depth, and it's not just the same old shtick. We're going to go to that at the same time. But we could talk about this forever and our love for cheesy horror movies, but you've gone through all this. You have all these accolades. What happens with The Spirit of Women? Is it because of your hometown and your connection there that you kind of wanted to explore whiskey? Or did somebody come to you because you have all these credits to you and said, I think you could really help with this film?
Such a good question. So I actually created this on my own and developed it on my own. And the way it kind of started is a few years ago, I was at the Angel's Envy Distillery and Buffalo Trace Distillery. And I was learning about kind of the art of making bourbon and whiskey. Because even though I had grown up, in Kentucky around all of this, I really didn't know much about how it's made, what it entails, all of those things. And I was pleasantly surprised and really fascinated by the art of making bourbon and whiskey. And I think that is the artist in me that looks at all of these different elements to create this kind of timeless piece. Every time that you drink a whiskey or a bourbon, it has a history to it. It came from specific trees. It was aged a certain way. People created this mash and this recipe. And it's really this really beautiful, historical thing that we have here in America with bourbon. And everything that I was kind of surrounded by and everything that I saw and everything that I grew up with in Kentucky was that had to do with bourbon and whiskey was always men. I always thought of bourbon and whiskey as a man's drink. And as I started becoming fascinated with bourbon and whiskey, I went down this rabbit hole of research. I started buying books on it. I was reading about it. I started, researching everything I could about the history and people involved in it. And that led me to discover how vital women's roles have been in not only the creation of alcohol since the very beginning of time that I didn't know about, but also the vital roles that they have had in the engineering and sustaining of whiskey and then bourbon once that started being made in America. And I was really upset that I had grown up in Kentucky around all of this and I had no idea about it. No one was talking about it around me. I think that has to do with a lot of things, marketing, society, like we could go on and on about why that is. I just really was fascinated by the work that women were doing in this predominantly male-dominated field. And I was hired last year to executive produce a whiskey television show in Kentucky So last fall, I went back home and I worked with a bunch of the distilleries. I was the only woman that was on set, and that's pretty common. Even in LA, that's a pretty common thing. So I was really grateful to be able to be a female on set and be working on this show, but that really also started spinning my wheels. I'm the only woman here. These distilleries are amazing. The work they're doing is amazing. I really wanted to learn more about what women were involved in all these distilleries. And I came back to LA, and I was standing in a Whole Foods actually, and I saw this American whiskey magazine, and it had 4 women on the cover of it. And I'll never forget standing in line and something in me just telling me to buy it. And I was like, oh, but do I need it? I don't know. But I just women's intuition. I just was like, okay, I'm going to listen to this instinct that I have. And I bought it. I went home, I read it. And that's where I discovered that the 4 women on the cover of the magazine were the female executive team over at Uncle Nearest. Not only had I not seen women usually on the cover of a whiskey magazine, but 2 of them were women of color. And this was amazing to me. So I read the whole magazine, and that's where I was introduced to Marianne Eaves, Jackie Zykan, the full female executive team at Uncle Nearest. And I was like, man, this is so cool. Why don't more people know about this? I mean, I grew up around this and I don't know about this. So that means that unless you're in the whiskey and bourbon community, you don't know about them on a massive scale. So I decided that I wanted to change that. I felt like the world needed to know what these women are doing, what they have accomplished in this world, because it not only relates to women in the world of whiskey and bourbon, but as a female in Hollywood, it also relates to a lot of the things that I've been up against as a female in this industry. So there's this paralleling theme that happens. So I reached out to all of them. And the first person I spoke to was Jackie Zykan. And I was like, look, this is who I am. This is what I do. I don't really know what I even want to put together with you yet, but I know that I want to do something. I want to tell your all story. I want you all to be able to tell your story in a massive way. People need to know who you are. Do you want to do this with me? And she was like, yes, I do.
And Jackie's the best. Jackie is just ready to dive right in. So
she is. And that's exactly what it was, because I didn't even know what this was going to be yet. I just knew that I needed to do something. I needed to use my skill set as a filmmaker, as all these things that I had now been doing for years and years with writing and producing and, now directing. And I wanted to push this movement forward in a way that people outside of bourbon and whiskey would know who they are and would know the roles that women have been playing in the creation of whiskey and bourbon throughout history.
I think a lot of people see whiskey and they don't realize what goes into it. And I always call it the 1%ers. Like everybody is the 1%ers that are who's going to listen to a bourbon podcast? Who's going to read a bourbon blog? Who's going to, go on the Facebook boards and actually talk about this stuff? It is totally the 1% that or what's the mash bill in there? What's the char? Where's the cooperage from? And a lot of people don't know. It's like the public knows. And it's the reason why spirits awards get so much press, because you can go slap a double gold label on a bottle and then somebody that doesn't know better walks through and goes, oh yeah, this is great. It won a double gold. But
totally.
Then you look at the bottle and it's like, oh, distilled in Indiana, just like with a whole bunch of other stuff that is on this same shelf. And those are the things that people don't realize at the end of the day. And they don't realize even just the fact that oh, there are women distillers out there. And I hate saying that. I literally hate saying that, especially in something I talked about to you before we even got on this and hit record is, Tennessee per capita, I think has the most female master distillers in the country. There's about 5 or 6 of them. That's great. I love that we have that here. It doesn't get celebrated enough. It was what I was telling you before. It's I hate asking the question, what's it like being a woman in whiskey? Because I really just want to ask, what's it like being in whiskey? But then I also don't want to unfairly downplay anybody's story by not asking the question. And then I'm like, well, what the hell do? I kind of give up. So, it's I really just want to know what people's stories are and what they're doing regardless of gender. But I also know what somebody has said to me before is until it's not an issue, it's still an issue.
That's right. That's the whole thing. And I actually very much appreciate everything that you just said. And I can understand, from my conversations with the women who are attached to be in the film, I think that they also are tired of being asked, what's it like to be a woman in whiskey? When really they just want to be seen as somebody doing something that they love, regardless if they're a person of color or what their gender is or their sexuality. Like, they don't want any of that to matter. But like you said, until we get to that point where it doesn't matter, which, by the way that we get there is by doing documentaries like this. It's by being on, podcasts, you inviting me on here to talk about this film, to talk about, this issue and kind of how do we change it and how do we bring everybody to the table so that it's more inclusive. Those are the ways that we actually get rid of the stigma. It's the same in film. I relate so much of this to film as well, because a lot of the stigma in film is also about being a woman, instead of just being seen as somebody who loves what they do and is doing what they do because they love it. And I think that one of the things that we want to talk about in the documentary, and that's also really important to me, is not checking a box. I never want to be hired as an actress, as a producer, as a writer, or as a director because I'm checking a box for somebody. And if a man gets a job over me because he is more qualified or he's better for that job, great. I don't ever want to be hired because I'm a woman. I want to be hired because I'm the best at what I do, but I want to be given the same opportunity as him. And that's kind of the difference, is like, we have to look at bringing these women in so that they have the same opportunity within this industry of whiskey and bourbon as the men do. Not hiring them because they check a box and then a distillery can say, well, we have a female master distiller, because that continues the problematic stigma of asking the question, what's it like to be a woman in whiskey? Because if you're only there checking a box, which has happened to these women, then we're not actually being progressive. We're not actually pushing things forward. So it's bringing everybody in with open doors and being able to create opportunity for all of them so that everybody can, rise up equally.
I think it's tough on the roles, right? And I think it's that story I told you, and our listeners know it was when Jane and Denny from formerly of Maker's Mark were on, and they were talking about, how Denny got a position as a distiller because he was in QC and there was an opening on the distillery floor, and Jane, they just never asked her. They never asked the women if they wanted to go to the distillery floor. I mean, distiller is such an interesting side of it, especially when you get to master distiller. I almost feel like anybody can distill. And I know this is not a cop out to the female master distillers out there and anything or master distillers in general, right? Because at that point, you're really plant manager. The blenders are the ones that are bringing the spirit to life. And they're the ones that are, if you look at some other spirits around the world, cognac is completely about blending, because they're sourcing that cognac from a ton of different distilleries and then they're blending it together. Scotch, it's all about the blending. Like, you think of who these rock stars really have been, with your Janes and your Jackies and your Nancy Fraley's and your Ashley Barnes, a lot of it is blending. And then in Tennessee, obviously Nicole and Alex, they are distilling / blending. They are controlling what spirit is coming out. And I'm not trying to downplay the distilling aspect of it, but even think about Marianne, where her forte has really come into has been blending spirits post distilling.
Absolutely. She is a genius when it comes to blending and crafting recipes and being able to put the right ingredients together to create an incredible product. 100%.
I don't even know what I'm saying right now, if it makes sense or if I'm just incoherently rambling late night. Like, it's just hard.
It makes sense to me.
It's just hard right now. I think like the question I have, it's like everybody wants to be a master distiller, but like, does anyone want to be a master distiller at the end of the day? Like, or is the rock star role blender? But then also I'm like screwed in the head because Jane was like, well, I became a blender because they never asked me to be a distiller. And I'm like, well, shit, like we're all moving that way now. Like we're all celebrate blenders. So like,
maybe that's the best position to be in.
Yeah. I mean, no. So I think like, what is the best thing that you think you found as you've gone through, not like the number one story, because that would be unfair to the other people that are going through this, but like, what do you think is the most interesting thing, I guess, you found as you've been talking to these women? Is there a common thread they all have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There is a common thread. All of the women that I have gotten to know are very different. They all have very different characteristics about them. They have very unique personalities that separate them. They come from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds. But the one piece that I think connects all of them is, number one, their absolute love for whiskey and bourbon in every sense of the word, from creating it to the recipes, to the science behind it, to the art. They absolutely love it. And the other part of it is their tenacity and fierce spirit that each of them has that has gotten them to where they are today. Because they've all been up against a lot of obstacles, a lot of things that other people may have given up or turned away, or it's too hard, or I don't know how to do this, or, I can't get in the door. And none of them did. They all paved their own path. And some of them, it was easier than others. But for example, Fawn Weaver tells an incredible story about how when she created Uncle Nearest, or was in the process of creating it, that she would call a bunch of different distilleries, and most of the time she couldn't get through to speak with the person in charge, or she wouldn't get a call back. And so instead of giving up or, just being like, well, this is too hard, she figured out another way. And she had her husband make the phone calls. And most of the time, if he made the phone calls saying it was him starting the company, he got phone calls back. Now, that was several years ago, and I hope that things are different now, but that is her story. And that is how she was then able to start her business and get this off the ground. But it took a lot of that. It took a lot of that legwork. And so one of the reasons that I call this film The Spirit of Women is not only because spirit is a play on the word of whiskey and bourbon, but because these women have fierce spirit in them. It is really, really hard to do the things that they have done, and they've never given up. And it's part of the reason that despite there are difficulties in getting this film off the ground, making films is one of the hardest things to do. Like these women, I look at them and I'm inspired and in awe of what they have done. And so that gives me the spirit to also push through the roadblocks and the difficulties, because I see these women who didn't give up on what they believed in. And I think that that's one of the coolest and most profound things that I have found in every single one of them is their spirit and their fierceness.
A little different, right? People aren't getting callbacks now because there's no more juice to give out. That's that's the difference, is you're not getting called back now because it's like you haven't had an established relationship at this distillery in the past 3 years. We don't have anything for you. I heard a great story today. There is a distillery that is opening up, and I'm not going to name names, right? But a distillery is opening up a contract portion of their business. So, they're an established distillery. They just got another still. Their first year of production was already bought before they've distilled one drop of it.
Oh my God.
If you want to know another film that would be interesting, not just, the women is a great topic, but all these non-distilling producers that have come up that are now taking all this contract distillery juice. Like there is going to be a shortage of whiskey for some of these brands, right? Like that are established brands that if you think about it, if you're not making it yourself and you're having somebody else make it for you, what happens when that place you're going to get it from now tells you, I can't make it for you anymore?
Yeah.
So
that's really unfortunate. That makes me really sad, actually.
That is
I think that part of like what's so beautiful about whiskey and bourbon is the community, right? Like the whole thing about bourbon is that it's made to be shared. And I love that because I think community is so important. And something that I've definitely noticed within the community coming into this as kind of a newcomer, even though I'm from Kentucky, I've been developing this documentary for a year, is how incredible people who love whiskey and bourbon are. Like they have opened their arms to me. People like you that were like, I believe in this film. You're doing something cool. Come on my podcast. Like you don't get that everywhere and in every industry. So it's very heartfelt for me. It really means something to me. The people involved in this, and I don't just mean like our cast, I mean the community and our followers and our supporters, they truly mean something to me. And so to hear something like that, it kind of breaks my heart because it's removing, in a way, that beautiful aspect of, this kind of idyllic story that we have around bourbon and whiskey and the heritage behind it and the family owned and the family values.
Well, but that's not, so it's still there, right? And this is just like, if you're trying to start a distillery, a lot of times before your still gets up and running, you might buy some whiskey from another distillery until you get your stuff ready to go, so you could get some money in the door, all that other stuff. If you're never planning on having a still, you're completely dependent on another distillery. And the whiskey boom has just had so many distilleries pop up. Some of these distilleries are doing their own distilling, some are not. Some of those ones that are not doing their own distilling might end up getting bought by bigger sharks. You never know what's going to happen. Like it's never and maybe like, hey, some of these other distilleries, maybe their play is to have an established brand to get bought by a shark. That might be their idea. So don't always think it's more complex, right? Like, hey, you're from Lexington. Is there money in horse racing or is the money really in the breeding? You never know.
Good point.
You never know, you got to follow the money with everything. And it's always kind of funny for me. And speaking of the money, I'm just going to say the Spirit of Women film needs your help. And I'll let you talk about that a little bit because you are going to brands, you are trying to get brands to give money. I don't think you're going to get mad at me for saying this. Just like an influencer on Instagram that's getting a bottle sent to them might have a brand put stipulations on them for what they can do or not do with said bottle and what they can say or not say in their Instagram picture. Leigha is a person like myself who kind of says like, you can send us the bottle and we're going to be honest and that's it. So because of that, to get things going, and I really, really, really respect that about her. People always say, how much is it to do a collab with Dad's Drinking Bourbon? I said, it's free, but we got to be able to say whatever we want. I'm not going to charge you to send us a bottle, but I always kind of equate it like when I worked at ESPN, we got a press pass because we had to cover the game. So they give us a sample of the whiskey because we had to cover the game. But, Leigha doesn't need brands to pay her to cover the game. She has the women lined up. She needs to pay for film. She needs to, it's digital film right now, but there's editing time. There's people that are working cameras. There's it can be her. She's doing everything she possibly can herself, but there are things she needs help with. You can go, if you go on Instagram and find at the Spirit of Women Film, and that is at all one word, the Spirit of Women Film. On the very bottom, there's a website. It's www.thefilmcollaborative.org/fiscal sponsorship /projects /the Spirit of Women Film. And I'm sure there's more. So just click the link because it was cut off as I'm reading this. I'm guessing where it goes. Please go there.
We have a link. We have a link in our bio. So
no, that's what I'm saying.
Everyone.
That's what I'm looking at right now. It's right here. I have it up on my phone, but it cuts off at a certain point. I'm assuming where it cuts off is the Spirit of Women Film, but just go to their Instagram and click the link on the bottom and Like if you have $5, give $5. If you have 25, give 25. Like just do something, but you explain more, because there's ways if you give certain thresholds of money, you get certain things as a part of this film, right?
Thank you so much for everything that you said. I think that you and I really bonded before, recording this. We both really bonded on integrity and being authentic with what it is that we do. And that's that's part of my ethos. And I want to tell a real story, and give these women the platform that they deserve to, tell their authentic stories. So, while we are going out to distilleries and brands to support this film, this will help brands and distilleries to show that they actually support women in whiskey by wanting to get this film made. We are also trying to raise $50,000 in the next, I think at this point, it's probably 25 or 26 days, which will help us really get off the ground. And one of the reasons that we are doing that, or that I'm doing it this way, is Hollywood always wants to make a show or a film about whiskey and men. Whiskey and men is a proven formula that works. There are a ton of TV shows, documentaries, and films about whiskey and men. But when you start talking about whiskey and women and wanting to do a film about them, what I've experienced is studios don't really know what to do with that, because it's never been done before, which is really exciting for our film, because no one has ever made this before. Nobody has had these women from Kentucky and Tennessee all in the same film that's really highlighting them. But at the same time, Hollywood doesn't like to do things that they're not familiar with. So instead of waiting on Hollywood to give us permission and to, risk what they would consider risk that investment, I've decided to tell this story anyway, and to do whatever I can to be able to get the funding that we need, because I believe that there's an audience out there for it. And I believe that there is a following out there for it that wants to see this get made, that wants to support this. So we have partnered with the Film Collaborative, which is a 501c nonprofit that allows corporations and individuals to donate to our project directly, and they receive a tax write-off for their donation. And then we've tried to create fun incentives for people. So we do have different tiers where, you can, one of them is if you donate a certain amount, you will actually have your name in our film. So we'll have a special thanks at the end of the film that'll show the credits of all of the people who donated a certain amount. They'll be included in our film. We have another one where you can actually come and hang out with us for a day on set, whether you're in Tennessee or Kentucky. You can come and see what it's like to actually be on a film set and see us working and be surrounded by whiskey and bourbon. We have another one where if you are a writer or you're wanting to get into film and television, you and I can schedule a Zoom and I can read your script. I can talk to you about, LA and how do you get into it. We're trying to do things that are fun and supportive, because we also understand that contributing to a film is still giving your money away. So we want to be able to give back to anybody who wants to join us and be part of this journey with us. And so we're also building this very big public campaign around this film, which most people don't do prior to shooting a project. We really want the public to be involved in this with us. We want to build a community of support. And so we're doing that by doing podcasts like this. We have 2 magazine publications that are going to be coming out in November and December. We're looking at doing daytime TV talk shows. We have some panels at film festivals that want us to come and speak there. So we're really trying to build this kind of global community around this film and bring everybody in to join us with it. And one of the ways that you can help us do that is by donating to the film, because we really need that. And we don't want to wait on the film industry to give us the green light to be able to do it. So this is how we do it instead.
Well, go to thefilmcollaborative.org/fiscal sponsorship /projects /the Spirit of Women. Or you could just go to thefilmcollaborative.org and look for the Spirit of Women. It pops up. Where's it go? No, it still does fiscal sponsorship projects, Spirit of Women. Oh, well, never mind. That was a fail. That was a fail on my side. But anyways, you could go there. There's a donate button when you're there, and then you can donate for this. And Leigha, you feel free to come back on whenever you want. You have an open invitation. If you're like, hey, we have some movement or we've started shooting and you want to come on and just give us an update on where you are in the process, or you are a friend of the program for life, and just come on whenever you want.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Honestly, you have no idea how much that means to me. I would love to come back on. It would be really fun to do an update. And I will just kind of say that, we've had this campaign going for donations for the past week, and we've been incredibly blessed. We've already raised $3,000. So that gets us, every inch closer to our goal. So I would love to come back on here and give you all an update, or have you on set. You can come and hang out with us. We can do a podcast there.
The good thing is I'm nearby. I'm in Nashville. So, chances are you're going to be here, and we can make that happen. I said I was going to make this. So y'all, I'm rushing this one out. I said I was going to make it shorter so that I didn't have to do a lot of editing. Yes, we're an hour and 10 minutes into this because it was just such a good conversation. Leigha, thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Y'all can find us on Facebook at Dad's Drinking Bourbon, Twitter at Bourbon Dads, Instagram at Dad's Drinking Bourbon. Please leave us an open, honest review, just like we leave open and honest reviews about the whiskey we drink. Go ahead and find Leigha at the Spirit of Women Film on Instagram, and find that long ass website. Just go to the Instagram and find it. But you can also find us here in Nashville, Tennessee. Cheers.